irrigation. This morning I also briefly met Dr. Arafin Putro, who is the dean, the head of the department. And I also had the pleasure to meet Professor Sigit Supatmo. Oh, sorry, thank you. And so I'm acknowledging them. I'm acknowledging, of course, the people online. And of course, most importantly, you. Welcome, good morning. I have to apologize, my Bahasa is non-existent. And so I will do it in English. I hope that you can follow all. If you have a question, if something is not clear, I'm used to be interrupted for questions and I'm actually quite happy to do so. Okay, let me start by standing up and being here. My background is in irrigation. I've been working quite some time in irrigation, mainly in research, mainly in academics, but I also did some irrigation engineering, so the design and the implementation, etc. So as Ansita already said, I worked in many countries and mainly actually in all 3 continents. So the topic indeed is irrigation in times of uncertainty. I never know, right? I never know on beforehand what you know about irrigation, what you know about agriculture, water management. So I always start with a question. And that question is, all right, how much water do crops evapotranspirate to produce our food? Right? So how much, like you see on the picture, you see the crop, right? You have the evapotranspiration, so it evaporates the water. That comes from irrigation, that comes from rain. Of course, there is some seepage. My question to you is, how much water do crop evapotranspirate to, so the crops, how much do they evaporate? How much water do they need for us to have our daily food? And I do that, I had wanted, let's say, a Mentimeter, but unfortunately I couldn't get to work. But, so I do it the old way, right? Think, per day, per person, on a global average, how much do you think crops evaporate the water just to produce the food? 100 liters per day, 1 to 200 liters, 500 to 1,000 liters, 2,000 to 3,000, or even more than 5,000. So it's a global average, right? Yeah? You know it? Shout it. Is it A, B, C, or D? C, yes, indeed. So, yes, congratulations. Okay, right. Indeed, 2,000 to 3,000 liters per person per day. If you start thinking about it, that's an enormous quantity of water, right? That's huge. If you do that for the whole world, you have a 7, I think with 12 zeros. You know, it's a really a huge amount of water. So, next question: where is most of this water coming from? Okay, A, B, or C? C? You think groundwater? Think again. Okay. Most of it, yeah, globally, comes from rainfall, right? You see, 82% of all that water is coming from rainfall. 10% for surface water, and groundwater is 8%, right? So this is all the water that we need to produce our crops. It's important, right? Rainfall, and we come to the uncertainties of the climate in a second, right? So we really dependent on rainfall, even in irrigated areas. So if that rainfall is changing or not coming or decreasing, then you have to supply enormous quantity of water to for our food crops to grow. Eh, Yeah, okay, it's a bit slow. So here I have some pictures, right? From in the left-hand corner, you have like a small canal, you have the big canals. You see on the picture there, you see a siphon. Can I walk over there? I'll show you here. Oh, it's far. There, right? You see a siphon, you see the irrigated area there, you see a small weir, right? What they do is they block the canal, they lift the water, and then with a siphon, they water the paddy field that you see behind the canal there. You have large tanks or large wells. You have the tube wells. So there's all kinds sorts of irrigation types. These are pictures from India, so not from not from Indonesia here, but I'm sure you find the same types here in Indonesia as well. Okay, some global numbers. I love numbers. I hope you do too. Otherwise, you're in trouble. But I really like numbers. So, but what is just said here, basically, is in the world we have 355 million hectares equipped for irrigation. So that's about 23% of the cropped area. Now, that is from the 60s to the 2023. It basically doubled, right? So there was a lot of investment in irrigated area. So that doubled. In Asia, 44% of the cropped area is irrigated. Okay, now let me see how well you know the Indonesian irrigation. All right. But let's first look at some global facts again, right? So you see that 23% of the global cropped area produces 48 of the total value of agriculture produce. So you see how important irrigated agriculture actually is. So this is the value. This is not the quantity. The quantity is about 40%. But because it tend to be higher value crops, you have a higher value. So nearly half of the agricultural output in value is coming from irrigated areas. And of course, the irrigated yields are much higher, and this is an FAO estimated. It says that nearly 76% higher. But of course, that depends the crop, that depends the country. So it's a rough estimate. Okay, as I said, for Indonesia, how many hectares do you have irrigated? Let me see whether you know Indonesia a little bit. You know it? No? No idea? Or in percentage? Do you know how many people are working, a percentage of the labor force working in agriculture? In irrigation, it's not known, but in agriculture, what's that? How many percent? I know, Rifan, we had a discussion and about the percentages of how much of the cropped area is actually irrigated in Indonesia. Yeah, how much do you think it is? 78%? 80% of the cropped area? Okay. Any other estimate? I got two very different numbers, but of course it depends also on how you calculate it. Um, So agriculture actually represents 14% of the economy, but it has like 33% of the labor force is actually in agriculture. And it's producing, so it's about 40 million people. 60% of the poor, right, rely on agriculture on their income. So it's really, the poor people are overrepresented in agricultural sector. Around 7 million hectare is irrigated. And I got a number of 15% according to the Aquastat. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but this is just what I found looking at the databases but 95, nearly all paddy is coming from irrigated land. So 95% of the national paddy produce is actually coming from. So for paddy cultivation, it's very, very important, the irrigated sector. Okay. Comparison with the Netherlands, that's always nice to, we have a very different agricultural sector, very high value. In the Netherlands, we have 2% of the labor force, only 2%. So 2% in 100 people, or 2 in 100 people, they're working in agriculture. It's also only 2% of the GDP, but it's so high value that the Netherlands, in value in agriculture production, it ranks second in the world. So it's very high value cultivation. So very different. Okay. So, by the way, maybe some people recognize this, the pictures. I see someone nodding. I can't quite read it. It's the Sri Harjo, huh? Sri Harjo. We went there. Do you know it? You haven't been to, no. Huh? Okay. Fleur from me. Okay. And the other picture there, you see some onion cultivation near the coast. Also here in Indonesia. And this one is also taken here. All right. I already said, right? Irrigation is very important for the 48% of the value of agriculture produced. So any idea why that is? What makes irrigation so special that it gives this high value of the produce? Any idea? Well, let me help you. Of course, it gives high yields. It allows for crop diversification, right? So it's not only paddy, it's also horticulture, it's all kind of stuff. It allows double and triple cropping. I believe here in Java you have 3 crops a year, right? Yes, so that's actually very high. In the Netherlands we have only 1 crop a year, so that but of course the climate helps and also the technology that you have. The 3 crops a year is actually highest in the world. Also, it gives stability, resilience, and climate adaptation. As I said already, if you need a lot of water, if the rainfall is late or then it's a good adaptation to climate change, irrigation. It also gives stability, and that's very important for farmers to invest in their production. If you don't know whether your crops will grow to harvest, for example, or whether your yields will be fine, then you're not investing in high value seeds or in fertilizer or even in land preparation, right? So then you basically, well, you're prudent, you don't invest so much. If you're nearly sure that it will be a good harvest, you're also investing more, also in labor and etc. Okay. We live in uncertain times, and I'm going to talk about a few aspects of those uncertain times. And those are climate change and variability. I was already talking about it. Water scarcity and the competition of other sectors. I think you as hydrologist, I think you already know this, you probably have, and water resources management. Pollution and salinization. In course of time, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Infrastructure and investment, and the demography, the demography and land use. So, in particular, the older and declining workforce and the loss of land due to urbanization and other sectors. So those are all big uncertainties in the irrigation sector today. And you see here some failing infrastructure. I will talk about that a little bit later. You see the left, that's these are drip. This is drip irrigation, which, well, you can see it did not work because of, well, this was uncertainties and it just technically it was not feasible. You see here some collapsed canals also, I mean, because of a lack of investment, lack of maintenance, things like that. All right, what do you know about climate change? Here in Indonesia, what do you expect? What are the predictions for Indonesia? Do you know that? Anybody? Huh. Do you talk about it? Do you get classes about climate change? Yes. Okay. All right. Then you should be expert here. So, no. All right. So these are studies. And I have to thank my good colleague Samuel, who prepared those slides. All right. So what is the general prediction? Basically, a delayed onset on the rainy season in near future, a shorter rainy season, and actually the amount of rainfall remains more or less the same, but it will fall in a shorter time, and the monsoon is later, actually starts later. That's kind of the general, and of course there's many other predictions there, which will result in a decreasing yield, and in particular, and you see here the pictures, right? The onset of the season mean, and you see the length. So the blue is that it's going to be later, the onset, and it's in days, and the length of the season is the red is shorter. You see left corner, rain-fed irrigated. You see red, that means that this is for Java. You see in by the red color, you see that it is actually decreasing the yield. And that's the rain-fed, right? Irrigation is decreasing a little bit, but not as much. There's some other studies as well, and they basically say that if you have a 30-day delay for the onset and the monsoon, it actually results in a 6 to 11% decrease in agriculture produce, primarily paddy. So those are quite big uncertainties, actually, and people are looking at the irrigated sector on addressing those. Uncertain times also because of water scarcity. Do you have water scarcity here in Indonesia? Yes? Everywhere? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Mhm. Right. So you see here, and this is this is the newest picture I could find. It's only from 2015, unfortunately, but I think it's now even more pronounced. You see basically the red colors is the irrigated area, and the darker the color, the more water scarcity there is. So this is only water scarcity in irrigated areas. So not in the rain-fed areas, but in the irrigated areas. So also it's not only the rain-fed areas that are suffering from water scarcity, but it's also the irrigated areas that are more and more affected by water scarcity. Oh, this, you see, well, one of the reasons, and these are global numbers, but I think they are applicable for many countries and Indonesia as well. This is a graph, and it starts in the 1900s, and it ends in 2020. And it's part data, part estimate, part modeling outcome. So it's not exact, it's not an exact science. But if you look at the increase, the blue is for agriculture. So you see that the amount of water globally in irrigation really jumps up. Orange is the industries. So that also you see from a little bit and it actually increases. And municipality is also increasing, but you see that it is still a small amount. But in particular, the industries. Industries need a lot of water for cooling, but also other. But I think it's primarily cooling that is the issue here. The Netherlands is a wet country, or at least that's what we thought until a few years ago. And we also start experiencing droughts and water shortage. And in particular, not as much in agriculture, but also. But here you see these are some screenshots I took over the past week of the main news site. This is actually the New York Times discussing the drought in Europe. And also a Dutch side here. So you see how water shortage is more and more affecting Europe as well. In particular, the navigation. The River Rhine is a very important navigation artery, basically in Western Europe. There's one part. The water is so low that the boats cannot go there anymore. So they basically have the northern part, and then they have to stop, and they can't go on, and then they have the southern part. So it's actually cut in two, and that's really exceptional. But this is the climate change impact. Of course, there's reduced agriculture output because, well, the Dutch government or actually the water boards, they said, sorry, no more water for agriculture. And so the farmers were not very happy with that, of course. But it's also the cooling for the industry, the energy, some of the energy supply, they had to shut down because they didn't have enough water for cooling. In particular in the Netherlands, we get problems with saltwater intrusion because the water level is so low that the seawater is actually intruding, which is also, well, of course, saltwater intrusion is always there, but now it's really starting to be a problem. And of course, we also in nature, right, we have a lot of low-lying peat soils, and if they are dry, they basically oxidize and they subside. So we also get like the land that is subsiding, and it is already quite low. So, but those are all kind of impacts of the drought in Europe, and that's ongoing at the moment. And so I think this is going to be the driest for the Netherlands. It's going to be the driest year on record. So since 18, well, I think they started in 1900 something, 1908 or 1990 or 10. I showed some really nice, well, not so nice, the pictures of the collapsed canals. If you see right? The aging infrastructure. And I think that's the same here, right? In agriculture, in the irrigation systems. Declining investment in operation and maintenance. And declining investment in new construction. Do you know if that is the same here in Indonesia? Is there a decline in investment? Yes, I hear yes. Huh. In new construction, operation maintenance, or all, both? Huh. Okay. But you see here the graph, and you have to look at this is the investments by the World Bank. And I just understood from Professor Sigit and Dr. Ansita that there still is a lot of investment by the World Bank in the irrigate and the ADB and the big banks, that they provide loans for the agricultural sector, and in particular the irrigation sector. And if you follow the blue line, right, the light blue line, I think I better point here. The light blue line, right? So it started in the 60s and it goes up there, right, up to the 80s, and it goes down again. And now it kind of, well, it picks up a little bit. So what happens is, and also here in Indonesia, but also India, in Sri Lanka, in China, you see that the investment really picked up in irrigation, and then steeply declined in actually in the early 1980s. It steeply declined. This is just for the World Bank, because that's the only data that's available. But other banks have the same. So now you see that so in the late 70s it was still 10% of their total portfolio of the lending, and now it's only 1%. So it's just really declined, and you see that also in the national programs. All right. Again, question, just an estimate for you, right? So the World Bank, they basically they do these big reports always. They look at the different countries, and Indonesia is one of the countries that they look at. Okay. Their estimate of the Indonesian irrigation systems, I think there's 36,000 or something like that. How many irrigation systems are there? It's okay, well, you can Google it. But anyway, I think it's around 35,000 or something like that. Okay, how many of them in percentage are classified as in poor condition? This was in 2024, 2025, when they did this study. Your estimate. Know your irrigation sector. 50, 50? 30? 60? That's so you're quite pessimistic, right? Like the most of the irrigation systems are in our bad shape. Anything? Well, I think the 50 is really close, right? It's 46. So, but I find that quite shocking, to be honest, right? 46, and this is the World Bank, and they do these surveys, and actually they are always very well optimistic and positive about. So 46, they even say 46% is in poor condition. So, and then with declining investments, you can see that it's a difficult situation, uncertain situation. Okay, and this is what we saw in the field just now, last week. You recognize the pictures, I guess. So what aging farmers, and I must say Indonesia is not alone here, right? Mostly, what happens is that the younger farmers, they don't want to get into agriculture. They say, no, that's dirty, you get wet, there's no money in there, etc. So they choose to be civil science, civil servant or scientist or other jobs. If they're lower educated, maybe a taxi driver or right. They don't want to go, and even the farmers themselves, they say to their children, don't go in agriculture. Right? So another thing is you see that, and particularly in the outskirts of Yogyakarta, you see it very clearly, conversion of agricultural land into urban areas. You see the city encroaching and the building and the building and the building. And I get back to there a little later. But you see that is really an issue, not only in Indonesia, everywhere. You see this land use change. Do you recognize this one at the left-hand side? The trucks, or actually the jeeps, I should say. Yeah, I see shaking. Have you ever been in a jeep like that? No? What it is, it's tourism, right? And I noted also this funny shape cars like yesterday, right? The I don't know how you call them in Indonesian, maybe. Huh? Volkswagen. Okay, fair. Okay. I don't know whether you've seen those, right? For tourists. So what happens in this is close to the Merapi, and Apadu? Okay. So farmers, right? They change to tourism, right? They build lodges, villas, whatnot. They start driving these trucks. It's not as dirty. You get a lot of money out of it. So there's a lot of incentive for farmers to go out, right? All right, let's talk a little bit to the responses of uncertainty. Right. So modernize irrigation and drainage, and I feel shy to talk about it when Ansita is sitting here because she's the expert in this one. Increase water productivity, diversify and reuse water, digitalize and automate, and adapt institution and farming structures. I'm talking 1, 2, and 5, and because of time, I don't go into the third and the fourth one. Okay, modernize, right? So it's about modernization. It's about the existing infrastructure more reliable, flexible, and maintainable, right? And so it starts quite often, as I said, 46% is in poor condition. So quite often it starts with rehabilitating the existing infrastructure and changing them to make them more, so improve the reliability, flexibility, and service delivery. And what that means is there's a lot of emphasis also on measuring flows, monitoring flows, and controllable structures, also asset management and also involvement of the farmers. And I think that's also Rifan's topic. The P3A is also kind of a movement towards modernizing the management of irrigation systems. And of course, improved operator performance and institution reform is also part of it. This Indonesia pioneers, so this was an article which was published by the World Bank. It says Indonesia pioneers irrigation service delivery innovation, and I think Ansita knows this. So what they try to do, right, is to get the farmers to organize, but also to have the farmers going into agreement with the management of the system. So basically, at the beginning of the season, they make a written agreement, and the manager promises to say, okay, I deliver so much water at that date on paper. So they make an agreement and they sign it, and the manager and the farmer, they basically go into an agreement. So it's not just the manager doing whatever he does, and the farmer's just sitting there and wait till the water comes. No, it's really an agreement, a written agreement on, and that's called a service a service agreement. So that's actually, I think if you would like to have more detail, I think Ansita can talk about it a few lectures. But that is part of the push to modernize. Something else that we saw. Oh, yeah, it's coming. Something else that we saw, and that is also part of the modernization of it attracts young farmers again. Or younger farmers, I should say, the millennium farmers again. Right, so it's many of those technologies that are now introduced, they are less dirty, and I put it in between, and they provide more money. So it's quite attractive. Okay, you see the hydroponics left, right? You know what hydroponics is? Yeah, I don't see everybody shaking yes. Yeah, you know. Yes, yeah. You know what hydroponics is? Hydroponics, yeah? Okay, right. In the middle, that's also hydroponics. That's actually in your backyard. You recognize it. And so you see that you can produce high value crops, irrigated, of course, because it's without soil, or it's on a substrate. And you can standing up, right? You don't even have to go down and dig like that. It's easy, and also it's you don't get dirty. You can easily do that. So that's really attracting young farmers. Yesterday we were with this gentleman, and he was proudly showing an app, right, where he could actually at a distance put on his sprinklers installation and also put them off again. And that kind of innovations that makes it really attractive to younger people as well. So they don't want like the basically the drudgery of paddy cultivation, the traditional one, but they do like this one, and they combine it with business. They combine it with all kind of other activities and training, education. There you see a picture from the coastal area, and there you also see, what's that? You can understand.
So the area where you can see the picture is in Parangtritis. Yeah, like they plant onions. Yep.
There again, right? It's highly profitable. At least that's what the farmers told us. It's actually with sprinklers or with hoses. So you don't, it's an activity that again attracts the younger farmers. So modernization is not only for increasing the production, but it's also to attract a different demography towards the irrigated sector again. Okay. Produce more with less water. More crop per drop. I think, have you heard that expression? More crop per drop? I don't know whether that is common. No, I see, I don't see people saying, hey, this is so. I guess it's not an expression that you know. But basically what you want to do, produce more with less crop, with less water. There's a whole slew of ways of doing that. Better scheduling, more flexible. That only is possible if you have a good infrastructure. So modernization is important. Deficit irrigation. Do you know what deficit irrigation is? What is deficit irrigation? Huh? They don't know, huh? Okay. So deficit irrigation means that okay, you can calculate how much water a particular plant or crop needs, right? And you can give the full amount. Let's say it needs like 500 millimeter in a season. So you can give the full amount, but you can also reduce that. You can also say, oh, I don't give the full amount. I only give 80% of it. So I only give 400 millimeter. So what it does, you reduce the outcome, the crop, the yield, you reduce it slightly, but you use much less water. So in the end, you produce more with less water. Is that clear? Yes. Okay. Well, yeah. So you see here, and I have the so the evapotranspiration. So you provide not the full amount, but you reduce it to let's say 80% of the full amount. Precision application, of course, you know, all drip, sprinklers, AWD. I don't think you know that term. I'll explain it in my next slide. Reducing the soil evaporation, and it could also be shifting to crops, generating more value per liter, like onions, for example. Onions have a very high water productivity. So water productivity means the amount of crop per unit of water. Okay, so reducing the soil evapotranspiration. You see here in the red arrow, right? You have a lot of water that evaporates straight from the soil. So it doesn't go into the soil, and the plant cannot use it. That is I did not have its picture here. Anyway, so you see in the field, and maybe I have a picture later, but you see in the field all this plastic, right? The plastic, the mulching as they call it. You know the plastic things. Yes. On the floor, on the soil. There's this holes in there. So the holes the plant can grow, but the rest is covered. So it's plastic, so the water cannot evaporate. So that is reducing your soil evaporation, sorry. Here you see drip irrigation. This is the more, let's say the easy version, right? You have the high tech, and this is the low version of drip. Basically what they do, they put a bucket or some kind of container at 3 meter high. And because of and they have these pipes, and because of the pressure, it goes to the pipes, and you have small holes in the pipe, and it works like that. But quite often you see, well, you have a pump, and so you don't see that. But this the left hand corner is the low tech version of that. Okay, AWD in rice. I know that they practice it here in Indonesia as well. What's that? Maybe. Let's see. Alternate wet dry. You know what? I don't know the Indonesian, but maybe you know it. Hmm. So basically, what it does, right? It's at certain periods you basically dry the paddy field, completely dry, so no water of layer, and then only later you put the water on again. So rice can perfectly grow as a highland crop without the standing water on the field. It's do you know why they put water on the paddy fields? Why is there always a layer of water on the paddy fields? Huh? You know it? You've seen paddy fields, right? Yeah. So there's always a layer of water. Why would you do that? What's that? Uh-huh. Okay, so the farmers think it's good for the paddy. Yes, okay. Uh-huh. Okay, all right. That could be a reason indeed, was maybe one of the reasons. Other reasons? But indeed, it's true, eh? The farmers think it's better for their crops. Other reasons? Absolutely. There you go. It's to reduce, primarily it's a labor reduction of labor needs, because rice can perfectly survive in standing water, but most of the weeds cannot. So if you put a layer of water, the weeds cannot grow, and hence you have less. Another reason might be is that farmers, they don't trust the irrigation supply. So they put a layer of water, and even if the 1 week the water is not coming, or 2 weeks the water is not coming, still there's a little bit of water, right? And that's indeed why farmers think it's better to have a layer of water on the. But you can perfectly do the alternate wet dry. So every period you just reduce the water. What it does, it reduces the water use, of course, right? Because less evaporation. It reduces the methane emissions. Do you know about methane from paddy fields? No? Yeah, you know. Methane? Methane is a greenhouse gas, right? And actually, it's a problem in rice, in paddy growing areas. Methane actually contributes quite a bit to climate change because it's a greenhouse gas. What happens if you have organic material under a layer of water, right? It doesn't, it only, how do you say that, disintegrate like partially. It does it in what they call anaerobic conditions. So in conditions where there is not much oxygen. And then you get the formation of methane. It's a chemical process. And you see it everywhere in the and of course you can do it, right? You can reduce the water without loss of yield. And do you know whether they do this in Indonesia, this alternate wet dry? It's not common.
Yeah, actually, alternate wet dry is not common in Indonesia, but in Indonesia we have system of rice intensification. Do you know SRI? System of rice intensification, and we have also irigasi padi hemat air, IPHA. Ini dikembangkan oleh Ministry of Public Works. Ya, jadi in system of rice intensification, we also give less water to paddy, so that the paddy can grow optimally. I think it is the same case with alternate wet dry. Yeah.
Now we have been talking about really technical interventions, right, to reduce uncertainty. One, and I looked, I gave the slide of the World Bank. So the World Bank, the program, you have like they really like the water users associations, right? The P3A, as they call them here in Indonesia. So it's basically to involve farmers in the management of the systems. And it's also for better management and operation. It's also to contribute to the cost of the operation and maintenance. I think here in Indonesia, there's a very low or nearly zero contributions by farmers to the operation and maintenance of the systems. That's actually quite exceptional. In most countries, farmers do contribute to the operation and maintenance. But here it's probably not the culture, but you see that governments, they would like to hand over the management to the farmers because they think then if the farmers are involved, the management is better. But of course, it's also cheaper. If the farmers are doing it, then you don't need to pay for it. So that's kind of this movement. Now you see in Africa, right? In particular, actually not only in Africa, you see it also in India, and I suspect you also see it here in Indonesia, but I don't know actually. The farmer managed irrigation or the farmer led irrigation, those are kind of slightly different, but so farmer led irrigation, right? You see that small farmers themselves, they take the initiative. They're not waiting for the government, right? They basically say, well, I do my own irrigation. I'm not waiting for the government for me to supply, to build a canal or things like that. So you see in the pictures, right? And so they do that without government support. Actually, quite often it's a response. Like the government is not acting, the government is absent, and so they say, well, we have to make a living. We do it ourselves. And you see that there's a quite strong movement actually among farmers. And in Indonesia, I don't know, but I know it in India, in Sri Lanka, in countries in Africa. But I suspect that in Indonesia, the involvement of the government in the irrigated sector is quite high. And so that is why there's no need or no space for doing that. But you see this guy here and on the left, he has his motorcycle, he has his bike and a motor pump, right? He just basically goes from field to field and people pay him for pumping the water on their fields. You see, have you ever seen the blue one, the blue thingy, right? That's what they call a treadle pump, but I don't think it was ever here. It was in Bangladesh, quite big. It was in India, it was quite big. It was in the 70s, 80s, and now you see it in Africa. You see it also. It's basically a foot pump. You basically do it like this, and you pump the water. So it's a manual pump, but then you treadle. That's why they call it a treadle pump, right? Are you going to the gym? Yeah. This gym, right? It's a little bit like that. But then without the arms. But you have in the gym you have those movements. So basically they use the human energy for pumping the water. Quite labor intensive, as I said. You need to pump like thousands of liters, right, for your crops. So it's sometimes they are traveling for 4 or 5 hours a day, which is, well, and that's why it never, and here you see the man, the lady, basically spraying, and they pump that from the river. Oh, hey, okay. The pictures did not come. They are in my computer, so that's a pity. But anyway, so there's the same kind of pictures of motor pumps in the river, and so basically, farmers buy a pump and they start pumping. Also from the canals and from the irrigation infrastructure. And this is an, oh, I see that it's not coming. That's a pity. I see that the pictures are not coming for some reason. But anyway, this is a case where they have a reservoir and downstream they have a rice area. So I guess you have reservoirs here as well, the small reservoirs. And downstream there was a rice area, a paddy area. But the paddy, so the water users association from the paddy field collapsed because they got into a fight. They didn't want to whatever, right? I mean, just collapse. So what did the farmers do? They moved upstream and started pumping straight from the reservoir. Right, so they had this huge body of water there. They basically just started pumping straight from the reservoir. Also, their fields are now all around the reservoir, and downstream, nothing anymore. So you see that farmers basically, if let's say their system collapses, they don't wait for the rehabilitation because that takes too long. But they use the existing infrastructure. They put a pump in the canal, they put a pump in the reservoir, and they start pumping. So that is also a response to uncertainty. Uncertainty whether the government is coming or not, or so, okay. Lastly, I want to kind of, and this is a point that many people often forget. People talk about irrigation, they talk about food, right? Or they talk about crops. But I would encourage you to take a broader view of irrigation in the landscape. And so those are basically services to the environment, and those are the ecosystem services. Now, I hope that these pictures are coming. Yeah. So there's a few, and in particularly in paddy fields, there are, and so there's a lot of paddy fields here in Indonesia. So I think the same things are happening here. What do paddy fields do? They can serve as a temporary water storage and flood attenuation. I'll have some pictures about that. They can recharge the groundwater, right? Because the water is standing. We were just talking about the paddy fields. The water is standing. And although you do some soil, how to say, manipulation, it still will infiltrate. Cooling. You ever walked through a paddy field and you think like, oh, it's much cooler here than in the surroundings? Well, that's, of course, it gives biodiversity and wetland habitat, and also aeration and sediment regulation. Let me see whether this works. Yeah. I spent quite some time in Sri Lanka, and I had the privilege of living close to a paddy field. So this was basically my view from on the second floor of the house. It's about 12 kilometers upstream from Colombo. And this is, well, you know, you see they are, they've just harvested. Then you see the buffaloes, they come in, they eat the residues, etc. So you see the wetland, you see the weir. Okay, this is the picture, right? The same situation after a good rainstorm, right? It was a heavy rainstorm, but not unusual. What you see here, basically, the water is kept maybe for a few hours, because then it rains again. I was already feeling sorry for the paddy field farmers here. I thought, oh, they lost their crops, but no, the crops were fine, right? They can stand a few this flooding. They can stand. What it does, right? It prevents actually the flooding in the city Colombo. Otherwise, you know, if you pave it, if you build it, and you see that happening a lot, right? Also here, so I showed that picture, land conversion, particularly around the edges of the city. You see that the water flows off much more quickly, and you get flooding in your city. And you see that unfortunately, they never did a study on this, but there is indications that indeed the flooding in Colombo is actually increasing, because that outer ring of paddy fields that are basically serving as a buffer is disappearing. Yeah, fortunately it goes. So this is a nice, you know, this is the upstream tank. Ideal for groundwater recharge and biodiversity, but you see that around that area, there's a lot of shallow wells, because people use that for drinking water or for the cattle, or so there's a clear indication that there's a groundwater recharge going on here. This is the example of another area. This is basically California, right? They do a lot of rice cultivation there as well, paddy cultivation. And you see that they basically, the nature conservation group, they got into discussion with the farmers, and the farmers, they adapted their paddy fields, their season and their practices to encourage the migratory birds. So the birds, they come in, they eat the crop residues. So after the harvest, they come in, they leave their manure. The birds, so also the farmers, they actually benefit from it. And also it's ideal for the migratory birds. All right, here you see, of course, the erosion control, right? You can imagine that if you have a steep slope and there's a heavy rainfall, you get a lot of erosion. But because of the paddy terraces and because of the water holding, that the water is temporarily stored, in this kind of landscapes, you hardly see, or it's highly reduced erosion. Well, if this paddy fields were not there, probably there would be an erosion problem here. So also in Japan, actually they call that the Tembo dams, or the paddy field dams. What they do to encourage the water holding capacity of the paddy fields, they basically make little dams or little, they make the bunds higher, and they have like little gates. And so if it rains really a lot, they keep the water, and only if the flood has gone, they open it again and they release the water, so that they save the downstream areas from flooding. Yeah, here. This is picture here in Yogyakarta. You know the name of the area?
That's in Banguntapan Wonocatur, Blok O. Blok Mbabi.
This was taken last week, so it's you see it ongoing in Yogyakarta, right? You see a lot of the areas being taken by residential areas, right? Residential. So what you lose if you basically completely build all the paddy fields, I already said of course the flood attenuation, but also, and this is again research from Japan, cooling. And actually there's a research in Japan that in the outer skirts of Tokyo, close to the paddy fields, it's actually 2 degrees cooler than the rest. Now, if you start calculating that in energy cost, and I mean air conditionings, then it's the substantial amount of money that you can save, basically by having those padding fields around the city. The scenery, and quite interestingly, I mean, if you saw the jeeps, right, the place where the jeeps were, the picture, right, you see there lodges and resorts and villas, whatnot coming, right? They rent them out. Now, the one guy, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ivan, one guy, he basically, the owner of the villa, who's renting it out to tourists, asked the farmer to not convert his paddy field, but to continue cultivating paddy. Why? For giving the tourist, let's say, the authentic paddy fields, scenery and experience. You see consistently, right, that housing at the border of a paddy field is higher. The price is higher, the value is higher. So these are all benefits, and in this particular case from paddy fields, beyond food, beyond the paddy. And I think this is also in an era of uncertainty and flooding and heating, decline of ecosystem services, etc., etc. I think it's good to take that also into account. I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm done. Okay. Wrapping up. That's indeed. So irrigation plays a large role in global food production, right? But times are uncertain. I've talked about the climate variability, the water scarcity, the decline in investment and infrastructure, demography and land use. And so things need to change. And I talked a little bit about the modernization of irrigation, the increase of water productivity, the adaptation of the institution and farming structures. But I think also, and I think that I hope that if anything keeps into your as in your memory after this lecture, paddy fields is not just about rice; it's about much more. And I think that is a kind of undervalued part of rice cultivation. That's it. Okay.
Please give applause to. So Charlotte, you may take your seat again. And thank you so much for your insightful presentation. And after this, we will continue to discussion session. But before we go to discussion session, I will give opportunity to student to scan your attendance QR code. Please share the QR code so that the students can scan the attendance record. Nggak bisa. Coba di refresh lagi, Bu Rese minta tolong. Ini sekalian mengenalkan ya, ini Bu Rose namanya. Sudah kenal belum? Bu Rose sebenarnya bukan dosen baru. Beliau masuknya 2019, tapi kemudian studi S3 di US, dan ini sudah kembali, baru saja kembali ke Indonesia. Nanti akan mengisi hidrologi kelas WTP 3. Ya. Bisa? Okay, Professor Charlotte, thank you so much for delivering very insightful and comprehensive presentation. And you already mentioned about the uncertainties in irrigation system, and you mentioned about climate variability and change that can result in decreasing yield and also water scarcity and competition from other sectors, infrastructure investment. And I think it is the same case in Indonesia. We also facing the issue about decreasing the infrastructure aid, and also we have research about how to measure the performance of infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure. And you also mentioned about demography and land use change. For your information, that we also have research about adaptive irrigation framework. So we predict the future land use and climate change in Progo Opak Serang River Basin. Do you know Progo Opak Serang River Basin? It is one of the largest river basin in Indonesia. We predict that for far future, the water scarcity will occur. So we need to adapt and we need to deal with the uncertainties in the future. One of them, we implement the irrigation modernization. Professor Charlotte already also mentioned about the modernization in irrigation, but actually modernization is not just about the infrastructure. We know that in Indonesia, we have five pillars in irrigation. The first one is water availability. infrastructure, performance, and then management system, institution, and human resources. So modernization is about the 5 things I mentioned earlier. And we also implement the irrigation modernization in around maybe 10 irrigation schemes in Indonesia. We implement SIPASI. I think some of you already known about SIPASI, sistem pengelolaan irigasi or irrigation management system, so that we can monitor the condition of irrigation system in real time. So it can support the decision system in irrigation scheme. And we have also a master student in irrigation system. He study about how to monitor the discharge in irrigation channel using smart equipment. Pelskal. Yeah, I think you install Pelskal in building measure in irrigation system. I think it is about automatic water level management system. Yeah. Maybe you can give brief description to Professor Charlotte, Pak Widi. Yeah.
So currently, I research about the Pascal that we used to measure it manually, but we developed the system that can be read by system using computer vision. So the design like this, we have color and pattern differentiation to get the limit of the water level. So that my current can be take with the phone and the CCTV. Yeah, for a live feed.
So you install some cameras and CCTV and to monitor the water level in irrigation channel, and then you can monitor using this Pelskal.
Yeah.
Is it correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, part of modernization, and it also support the SIPASI, our system that already developed in Indonesia.
If you don't mind, you can take it as a souvenir.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pak Widi. Okay, thank you so much. We will continue to discussion session, but because we have limited time for this session, I will take two questions. Two questions from students, maybe from offline participants, as well as online participant can also raise your hand or write your question into the chat box. I will read the question and deliver to Professor Charlotte. Okay.
Can I while the
You
microphone?
have any question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Please.
it's a little bit technical. Is that okay? So in Indonesia, we use the primary apa ya getbook named KP or kriteria perencanaan or planning criteria that mention the type of water gates like Romin. I believe its origin is from Netherlands. The spelling is Romijn. Romin. Is it?
Do you know Romin gate?
Romin.
It is a part of a controlling system in irrigation. A gate that the name is Romin. Or Roman, yeah,
Okay.
Roman. Sorry.
Sorry for the
for wrong pronunciation.
Yeah. In the book, just generally, but they don't mention how to calibrate or how to build from zero. And I wonder if you still use that type of gate or have a literature, so we still use that kind of water gates in certain irrigation area. So when we have to repair or rehabilitate the gate, we don't have the standards. So I wonder if you have the standard. That's my first question. And the second, uh, when I work for the automatization control, I found that the operation of the gate, it's work as a connecting vessel. So if we operated one gate, it will affect the water level in other gates. So it makes hard to precisely control the right amount of the water quantities. So how you uh, allocate the water in maybe in other country or the in the Netherlands? Thank you.
So about the Romein weir, it's a weir, right? Yeah.
We know it as a gate that can
Gate,
measure
yeah, okay.
and control the.
Yes, so there is a handbook that's called by Bos. I don't know, you know Rien Bos? Maybe anyway, there's a well-known handbook, and there's all described with all the formulas and things like that. So I can share a link of that handbook, and so that's what we actually also been taught in university, and also we still use in the field. About the let's say that's indeed a challenging question. We actually in the Netherlands we don't discharge the water so much, so it's slightly different how we use our gates and weirs in the Netherlands. It's not for providing water, but rather for releasing the water and either stopping and then so it's slightly different how we use the canals with the gates. So I'm afraid I cannot really answer on how to do that if they. But why aren't they far apart or is that or I mean it's you say that they influence each other?
Yeah. Let's say in one point of the distribution gates, there are maybe 3 to 5 gates that affect each other. And in one primary system, let's say it's have about 20 or 30 gates total. It affect each other too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. Maybe how you distribute the water in open channel irrigation?
I think it's if I from practice, I mean you see that the gatekeepers they kind of start to know, okay, it's not really like theoretically calculated, but it's from experience that they know, oh, if I open this one, I can open this one, I can open this one. So I think that is in and that you see also in the polder management in the Netherlands, that it's really from well trial and error and from experience on how the gates are operated.
Okay. How to audit the performance of the operators then? Uh, so
By
if
the amount of water that is being, so you have a certain goal. Okay, you need to release so much water. So you look at the output of the particular operator and say, hey, it's like the service agreements, right? That I was talking about. So you basically measure the performance by the output that they deliver. So they have to deliver so much water at that time. And that's how you basically measure the performance.
Okay. Can I ask again? When they set the gate at the morning and the other operators set another gate, it will change the measurement, right? In first gate. So they can say that earlier it's was the right amount, but right now it's not anymore because the other operator operating the gates, the other gates. So
Yes, but don't they make a plan in the morning?
Yeah.
Like, okay, where do they open which gate? So they know which gates are open. So it's not unexpected that there is another gate open, right? So then you can they coordinate on which gate to open when. And so you can anticipate that it reduces and you can basically open it a little bit again.
it's,
I mean, you have a plan, right, on how where you're going to manage. So if there is a communication between the gatekeepers, or there's a manager who has the oversight of all the gatekeepers, then that should not be a problem. If that is, if there is like a service agreement, is what I was talking about.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Widi, for your questions, and thank you also, Professor Charlotte, for your answer. And I'm also interested to have the guidebook about Romain. You can maybe you can send to me, and I can send to him. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. We apologize that we have limited time for the discussion session, so I need to wrap up our discussion session here. If you have still have any questions, you can send the question to me, and then I will send and forward your question to Professor Charlotte. Okay, Professor Charlotte, once again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience today. And we hope that we can see you again in the next future. And for our students, for online and offline participant, thank you so much for joining today's lecture. And for students, welcome back once again and have a good start to the new semester. Thank you everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Please stand up here. We can foto. Kita foto dulu ya, adik-adik ya. Tapi dari tempat masing-masing saja. Ya, we can stand up here and the student apa? Oh ya.
Semuanya saya foto siap. Oke, ready pakai kamera. 1, 2, 3. Oke, once more. Sekali lagi 1, 2, 3. Oke. Mungkin ada gaya lagi. Ada saya. Oke. 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 Oke, semuanya. Everybody 1, 2, 3. Oke, once more. 1, 2, 3. Oke.
Yeah, this is for you. From our master's